Book 9. Injustice is a sin. Nature has constituted rational beings for their own mutual benefit, each to help his fellows according to their worth, and in no wise to do them hurt. And to contravene her will is plainly to sin against this eldest of all deities. Untruthfulness, too, is a sin, and against the same goddess. For nature is the nature of existence itself, and existence connotes the kinship of all created beings. Truth is but another name for this nature, the original creator of all true things. So, where a willful lie is a sin, because the deception is an act of injustice, an involuntary lie is also a sin, because it is a discordant note in nature's harmony, and creates mutinous disorder in an orderly universe. For mutinous it indeed is when a man lets himself be carried, ever involuntarily, into a position contrary to truth, seeing that he has so neglected the faculties nature gave him that he is no longer able to distinguish the false from the true. Again, it is a sin to pursue pleasure as a good. Again, it is a sin to pursue pleasure as a good. Again, it is a sin to pursue pleasure as a good and to avoid pain as an evil. It is bound to result in complaints that nature is unfair in her rewarding of vice and virtue, since it is the bad who are so often in enjoyment of pleasures and the means to obtain them, while pains and events that occasion pains descend upon the heads of the good. Besides, if a man is afraid of pain, he is afraid of something happening which will be part of the appointed order of things, and this is itself a sin. If he is bent on the pursuit of pleasure, he will not stop at acts of injustice, which again is manifestly sinful. No, when nature herself makes no distinction, and if she did, she would not have brought pains and pleasures into existence side by side. It behooves those who would follow in her footsteps to be like-minded and exhibit the same indifference. He, therefore, who does not view with equal unconcern pain or pleasure, death or life, fame or dishonor, all of them employed by nature without any partiality, clearly commits a sin. And in saying that nature employs them without partiality, I mean that every successive generation of created things equally passes through the same experiences in turn. For this is the outcome of the original impulse which in the beginning moved providence, by taking certain germs of future existences and endowing them with productive powers of self-realizations, of mutation, and of succession. To progress from the inception of the universe is to present orderly system. A man of finer feelings would have taken leave of the world before ever sampling its falsehood, double-dealing, luxury, and pride. But now that all these have been tasted to satiety, the next best course would be to end your life forthwith. Or are you really resolved to go on dwelling in the midst of iniquity, and has experience not yet persuaded you to flee from the pestilence? For infection of the mind is a far more dangerous pestilence than any unwholesomeness or disorder in the atmosphere around us. In so far as we are animals, the one attacks our lives, but as men, the other attacks our manhood. Despise not death, smile rather at its coming. It is among the things that nature wills. Like youth and age, like growth and maturity, like the advent of teeth, beard, and grey hairs, like begetting, pregnancy, and childbirth, like every other natural process that life's seasons bring us, so is our dissolution. Never then will a thinking man view death lightly, impatiently, or scornfully. He will wait for it as but one more of nature's processes. Even as you await the baby's emergence from the womb of your wife, so await the hour when the little soul shall glide forth from its sheath. But if your heart would have comfort of a simpler sort, then there is no better solace in the face of death than to think on the nature of the surroundings you are leaving, and the characters you will no longer have to mix with. Not that you must find these offensive. Rather, your duty is to care for them and bear with them mildly. Yet never forget that you are parting from men of far other principles than your own. One thing, if any, might have held you back and bound you to life, the chance of fellowship with kindred minds. But when you contemplate the weariness of an existence in company of discordant, you cry, "Come quickly, death, lest I too become forgetful of myself." The sinner sins against himself, the wrongdoer wrongs himself, becoming the worse by his own action. A man does not sin by commission only, but often by omission. Enough if your present opinion be grounded in conviction, your present action grounded in unselfishness, and your present disposition contented with whatever befalls you from without. Erase fancy, curb impulse, quench desire, let sovereign reason have the mastery. A single life principle is divided amongst all irrational creatures, and a single mind principle distributed among the rational. Just as this one earth gives form to all things earthy, and just as all of us who have sight and breath see by the self-same light and breathe of the self-same air. All things that share the same element tend to seek their own kind. Things earthy gravitate towards earth, things aqueous flow towards one another, things aerial likewise, whence the need for the barriers which keep them forcibly apart. The tendency of flames is to mount skyward because of their elemental fire. Even here below, they are so eager for the company of their own kind that any sort of material, if it be reasonably dry, will ignite with ease, since there is only a minority of its ingredients which is resistant to fire. In the same way, therefore, all portions of the universal mind are drawn towards one another, more strongly indeed, since being higher in the scale of creation, their eagerness to blend and combine with their affinities is proportionately keener. This instinct for reunion shows itself in its first stage among the creatures without reason, when we see bees swarming, cattle herding, birds nesting in colonies, and couples mating, because in them soul has already emerged, and in such relatively higher forms of life as theirs, the desire for union is found at a level of intensity which is not present in stones or sticks. When we come to things with reason, there are political associations, comradeships, family life, public meetings, and in times of war, treaties and armistices. And among the still higher orders, a measure of unity even exists between bodies far separated from one another, as for example with the stars. Thus ascent in the ranks of creation can induce fellow feeling even when there is no proximity. Yet now see what happens. It is we intelligent beings, who alone have forgotten this mutual zeal for unity. Among us alone, the currents are not seen to converge. Nevertheless, though man may flee as he will, he is still caught and held fast. Nature is too strong for him. Observe with care, and you will see. You will sooner find a fragment of earth, unrelated to the rest of earth, than the man who is utterly without some link with his fellows. Everything bears fruit. Man, God, the whole universe, each in its proper season. No matter that the phrase is restricted in common use to vines and such like. Reason, too, yields fruit, both for itself and for the world, since from it comes a harvest of good things, themselves all bearing the stamp of reason. Teach them better, if you can. If not, remember that kindliness has been given you for moments like these. The gods themselves show kindness to such men, and at times, so indulgent are they either aid them in their endeavours to secure health, wealth, or reputation. This you too could do. Who is there to hinder you? Work yourself hard, but not as if you were being made a victim, and not with any desire for sympathy or admiration. Desire one thing alone, that your actions or inactions alike should be worthy of a reasoning citizen. Today I have got myself out of all my perplexities, or rather, I have got all the perplexities out of myself, for they were not without, but within. They lay in my own outlook. Everything is banal in experience, fleeting in duration, sordid in content, in all respects the same today as generations now dead and buried have found it to be. Facts stand wholly outside our gates. They are what they are, and no more. They know nothing about themselves, and they pass no judgment upon themselves. What is it, then, that pronounces the judgment? Our own guide and ruler, reason. A rational and social being is not affected in himself for either better or worse by his feeling, but by his will, just as outward behaviour, good or bad, is the product of will, not of feelings. For the thrown stone there is no more evil in falling than there is good in rising. Penetrate into their most minds, and you will see what manner of critics you are afraid of, and how capable they are of criticizing themselves. All things are in process of change. You yourself are ceaselessly undergoing transformation and the decay of some of your parts, and so is the whole universe. Leave another's wrongdoing where it lies. In the interruption of an activity, or the discontinuance and, as it were, death of an impulse or an opinion, there is no evil. Look back at the phases of your own growth: childhood, boyhood, youth, age. Each change itself a kind of death. Was this so frightening? Or take the lives you lived under your grandfather, and then under your mother, and then your father. Trace the numerous differences and changes and discontinuances there were in those days, and ask yourself, were they so frightening? No more so, then, is the cessation, the interruption, the change from life itself. Your own mind, the mind of the universe, your neighbor's mind, be prompt to explore them all. Your own, so that you may shape it to justice. The universe's, that you may recollect what it is you are part of. Your neighbor's, that you may understand whether it is informed by ignorance or knowledge, and also may recognize that it is kin to your own. As a unit yourself, you help to complete the social whole, and similarly, therefore, your every action should help to complete the social life. Any action which is not related either directly or remotely to the social end disjoints that life and destroys its unity. It is as much the act of a schismatic as when some citizen in the community does his utmost to disassociate himself from the general accord. Childish squabbles, childish games, petty breaths supporting corpses. Why, the ghosts in Homer have more evident reality. First, get at the nature and quality of the original cause, separate it from the material to which it has given shape, and study it, then determine the possible duration of its effects. The woes you have had to bear are numberless because you were not content to let reason, your guide and master, do its natural work. Come now, no more of this. When those about you are venting their censure or malice upon you, or raising any other sort of injurious clamour, approach and penetrate into their souls, and see what manner of men they are. You will find little enough reason for all your painstaking efforts to win their good opinion. All the same, it still remains your duty to think kindly of them, for nature has made them to be your friends, and even the gods themselves lend them every sort of help, by dreams and by oracles, to gain the ends on which their hearts are set. When those about you are venting their censure or malice upon you, or raising any other sort of injurious clamour, approach and penetrate into their souls, and see what manner of men they are. You will find little enough reason for all your painstaking efforts to win their good opinion. All the same, it still remains your duty to think kindly of them, for nature has made them to be your friends, and even the gods themselves lend them every sort of help, by dreams and by oracles, to gain the ends on which their hearts are set. Upwards and downwards, from age to age, the cycles of the universe follow their unchanging round. It may be that the world mind wills each separate happening in succession, and if so, then accept the consequences. Or, it may be, there was but one primal act of will, of which all else is the sequel, every event being thus the germ of another. To put it another way, things are either isolated units, or they form one inseparable whole. If that whole be God, then all is well, but if aimless chance, at least you need not be aimless too. Soon earth will cover us all. Then in time earth, too, will change. Later, what issues from this change will itself in turn incessantly change, and so again will all that then takes its place, even unto the world's end. To let the mind dwell on these swiftly rolling billows of change and transformation is to know a contempt for all things mortal. The primal cause is like a river in flood. It bears everything along. How ignoble are the little men who play at politics and persuade themselves that they are acting in the true spirit of philosophy, babes, incapable even of wiping their noses. Why then, you who are a man, why, Do what nature is asking of you at this moment. Set about it as the opportunity offers, and no glancing around to see if you are observed. But do not expect Plato's ideal commonwealth. Be satisfied if even a trifling endeavour comes off well, and count the result no mean success. For who can hope to alter men's convictions, and without change of conviction, what can there be but grudging subjection and feigned assent? Oh yes, now go on and talk to me of Alexander and Philip and Demetrius of Phaleron. If all men did in truth understand the will of nature and school themselves to follow it, that is their own affair. But if it was nothing more than a stage role they were playing, no court has condemned me to imitate their example. Philosophy is a modest profession, all simplicity and plain dealing. Never try to seduce me into solemn pretentiousness. Look down from above on the numberless herds of mankind and the mysterious ceremonies, the divers voyagings in storm and calm, and all the checkered pattern of their comings and gatherings and goings. Go on to consider the life of bygone generations, and then the life of all those who are yet to come, and even at the present day, the life of the hordes of far-off savages. In short, reflect what multitudes there are who are ignorant of your very name. How many more will have speedily forgotten it? How many, perhaps praising you now, who will soon enough be abusing you, and that therefore remembrance, glory, and all else together are things of no worth. When beset from without by circumstance, be unperturbed. When prompted from within to action, be just and fair. In fine, let both will and deed issue in behaviour that is social and fulfills the law of your being. Many of the anxieties that harass you are superfluous. Being but creatures of your own fancy, you can rid yourself of them and expand into an ampler region, letting your thoughts sweep over the entire universe, contemplating the illimitable tracts of eternity, marking the swiftness of change in each created thing, and contrasting the brief span between birth and dissolution with the endless eons that precede the one and the infinity that follows the other. A little while, and all that is before your eyes now will have perished. Those who witness its passing will go the same road themselves before long, and then what will there be to choose between the oldest grandfather and the baby that died in his cradle? Observe the instincts that guide these men, the ends they struggle for, the grounds on which they like and value things. In short, picture their souls laid bare, yet they imagine their praises or censures have weight to help or hurt. What presumption! Loss is nothing else but change, and change is nature's delight. Ever since the world began, things have been ordered by the decree in the self-same fashion as they are at this day, and as other similar things will be ordered to the end of time. How then can you say that it is all amiss, and ever will be so, that no power among all the gods in heaven can avail to mend it, and that the world lies condemned to thraldom of ills without end? The substance of us all is doomed to decay, the moisture and the clay, the bones and the fetter. Our precious marble is but a callosity of the earth, our gold and silver, her sediment, our raiment, shreds of hair, our purple, a fish's gore, and thus with all things else. So too is the very breath of our lives, ever passing as it does from this one to that. Enough of this miserable way of life, these everlasting rambles, these monkey antics. Why must you agitate yourself so? Nothing unprecedented is happening. So what is that disturbs you? The form of it? Take a good look at it. The matter of it? Look well at that too. Beyond form and matter there is nothing more. Even at this late hour, set yourself to become a simpler and better man in the sight of the gods. For the mastering of that lesson, 3 years are as good as 100. If he sinned, the harm is his own. Yet perhaps, after all, he did not. Either things must have their origin in one single intelligent source, and all fall into place to compose, as it were, one single body, in which case no part ought to complain of what happens for the good of the whole, or else the world is nothing but atoms and their confused minglings and dispersions. So why be so harassed? Say to the reason at your helm, come, are you dead and in decay? Is this some part you are playing? Have you sunk to the level of a beast of the field, grazing and herding with the rest? The gods either have power or they have not. If they have not, why pray to them? If they have, then instead of praying to be granted or spared such and such a thing, why not rather pray to be delivered from dreading it, or lusting for it, or grieving over it? Clearly, if they can help a man at all, they can help him in this way. You will say perhaps, but all that is something they have to put in my own power. Then surely it were better to use your power and be a free man, than to hanker like a slave and a beggar for something that is not in your power. Besides, who told you the gods never lend their aid even towards things that do lie in our own power? Begin praying in this way, and you will see, where another man prays, "Grant that I may possess this woman," let your own prayer be, "Grant that I may not lust the possessor." Where he prays, "Grant me to be rid of such and such a one," you pray, "Take from me my desire to be rid of him." Where he begs, "Spare me the loss of my precious child," beg rather to be delivered from the terror of losing him. In short, give your petitions a turn in this direction, and see what comes. "When I was sick," said Epicurus, "I never used to talk about my bodily ailments. I did not," he says, "discuss any topic of that kind with my visitors. I went on dealing with the principles of natural philosophy, and the point I particularly dwelt on was how the mind, while having its part in all these commotions of the flesh, can still remain unruffled, and pursue its own proper good. Nor," he adds, "did I give the doctors a chance to brag of their own triumphs. My life merely went on its normal way, smoothly and happily." In sickness then, if you are sick, or in trouble of any other kind, be like Epicurus. Never let go your hold on philosophy for anything that may befall, and never take part in the nonsense that is talked by the ignorant and uninstructed. This is a maxim on which all schools agree. Concentrate wholly on the task before you, and the instrument you possess for its accomplishment. When you are outraged by somebody's impudence, ask yourself at once, can the world exist without impudent people? It cannot, so do not ask for impossibilities. That man is simply one of the impudent whose existence is necessary to the world. Keep the same thought present whenever you come across roguery, double-dealing, or any form of obliquity. You have only to remind yourself that the type is indispensable, and at once you will feel kindlier towards the individual. It is also helpful if you promptly recall what special quality nature has given us to counter such particular faults, for there are antidotes with which she has provided us, gentleness to meet brutality, for example, and other correctives for other ills. Generally speaking, too, you have the opportunity of showing the culprit his blunder, for everyone who does wrong is failing of his proper objective, and is thereby a blunderer. Besides, what harm have you suffered? Nothing has been done by any of these victims of your irritation that could hurtfully affect your own mind, and it is in the mind alone that anything evil or damaging to the self can have reality. What is there wrong or surprising, after all, in a boor behaving boorishly? See then if it is not rather yourself you ought to blame for not foreseeing that he would offend in this way. You, in virtue of your reason, had every means for thinking it probable that he would do so. You forgot this, and now his offence takes you by surprise. When you are indignant with anyone for his perfidy or ingratitude, turn your thoughts first and foremost upon yourself, for the error is clearly your own. If you have put any faith in the good faith of a man of that stamp, or when you have done him a kindness, if it was not done unreservedly, and in the belief that the action would be its own full reward. Once you have done a man a service, what more would you have? Is it not enough to have obeyed the laws of your own nature without expecting to be paid for it? That is like the eye demanding a reward for seeing, or the feet for walking. It is for that very purpose that they exist, and they have their due in doing what they were created to do. Similarly, man is born for deeds of kindness, and when he has done a kindly action, or otherwise served the common welfare, he has done what he was made for, and has received his quittance.